Hello and welcome to Rules and Rulings, helping you to be judge, jury, but hopefully not executioner of your 5e D&D games. Today we're discussing the abracadabras and hocus pocuses of the D&D world. It's verbal spell components. The Player's Handbook describes the verbal components of spells as the chanting of mystic words. Their power to create a magical effect comes from the pitch and resonance rather than the meaning of the words themselves. What this does not make clear is the matter of volume. Players often find themselves in the position of wanting to cast spells with some degree of subtlety, whispering or even mouthing their incantations, and the PHB offers no guidance on to what degree that should work. Not directly, but we do have something to go off: the Sorcerer's Subtle Spell Metamagic option. This option allows a sorcerer to spend one of their sorcery points to manifest a spell without verbal or somatic components. So we can keep that in mind when thinking about how easy it should be to avoid being detected while casting a spell. Verbal components are the most common type in the game, present in almost every spell. Magical words and phrases are a powerful trope when it comes to spell casting, so it makes sense for them to be very common in D&D spells. This is especially true for clerics. Every single spell on the cleric list has a verbal component, and it's hard to imagine that being a coincidence, especially given the obvious parallel with prayers and scripture. Going back to the description from the Player's Handbook, what class springs to mind when we talk about pitch and resonance? The Bard. Unfortunately, the Bard has no particular interaction with this component save for the fact that most of their spells have them. It would be very interesting if mastery over verbal components was part of the Bard's identity and toolkit. Perhaps they could be adept at generating that pitch and resonance while singing unrelated words, playing music, or even dancing to a specific beat. The Bard spell list contains less than 24 spells that have purely verbal components, so it's unlikely that would affect the balance of the class over much. And let's be honest, there's more than a couple players out there who'd love to be able to cast Power called Kill. However, a couple of those spells draw attention to another issue with verbal components. In cases where the spell involves a command, a suggestion, or another verbal directive, do you consider that to be the verbal component? You can definitely make an argument either way when it comes to in-world justification. Simply speaking a command and having the force of your magic push it into the other person's mind is a strong fantasy to evoke, but it also makes sense that those incantations would still be needed in order to trigger the spell's effect on the following words. Spells like command do not specify that their verbal components are met by virtue of their being included in the spell description. Take the spell Blindness Deafness as a comparison. It also requires only verbal components, but those components allow the effect of the spell to take place. Mechanically, it also doesn't make much sense for a command or suggestion to be the verbal component, because what then are you left with when the feature allows you to forego that component? A sorcerer's subtle command would just be silence, which the creature somehow interprets as a one-word instruction. So that was a few words on the topic of verbal components. What do you think? Does it make sense that all cleric spells are flavoured as prayers and benedictions? Do you agree that it's a shame bards aren't more tied into this aspect of spellcasting? Where do you land on the scale of enforcing them? Whisper or shout about it in the comments and let me know what you think, and I'll hear you next time.